to support the legislation, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Arkansas yields back. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserved. The gentlelady from D.C. is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Mississippi.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentlelady from the district for giving me the time. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 4984, the D.C. Robert F. Kennedy Memorial Stadium Campus Revitalization Act. This legislation presents an opportunity to revitalize the RFK Stadium campus, a historic site that has served as a cornerstone of our nation's capital sporting legacy for over 5 decades. However, over the past 2 decades, the campus has sadly remained underutilized due to outdated statutory restrictions. These restrictions have limited the use of the RFK campus to stadium purposes only, leading to a gradual decline and erosion. This legislation focuses on transforming the RFK campus into a mixed-use site which will create thousands of jobs. Additionally, it ensures that district residents gain direct access to premium recreational opportunities, including green spaces and scenic walking trails along the riverfront. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this critical legislation. I yield back.
The gentleman from Mississippi yields back. The gentlelady from D.C. reserves.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
Okay. The chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker,
Secretary.
I am directed by the President of the United States to deliver to the House of Representatives a message in writing.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserved. The gentlelady from D.C. is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the gentlewoman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to H.R. 4984, the D.C. Robert F. Kennedy Memorial Stadium Campus Revitalization Act. Like other members of the Maryland delegation, I believe Prince George's County and Maryland should be able to compete on a level playing field to keep the Washington Commanders. But this bill would give an unfair advantage to D.C. It's most certainly not a level playing field when one interested jurisdiction receives a free transfer of federal government subsidized land. I'm not opposed to D.C. bidding to be the new home of the Washington Commanders, but its pursuit of the Commanders should be no different than its efforts to compete with Virginia for the Wizards and the Capitals. This is also a bad deal for federal taxpayers. This bill transfers control over federal government property at no apparent cost to the District of Columbia so that private ownership can build a football stadium. This is not a District of Columbia home rule issue. This is no different than any other city or state competing for a sports franchise or stadium. No different than the state of New Jersey competing with the state of New York for the Jets or the Giants. I do not object also to the redevelopment or renovation of the current RFK campus. I think it would be outstanding to have new housing, retail use, and park space there. Matter of fact, I live near the stadium and drive by it every day, but I do not believe a cost-free land transfer largely for stadium purposes provides the best opportunity to achieve these goals. I ask my colleagues to oppose this bill, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Maryland yields back. The gentlelady from D.C. is recognized.
I reserve, Mr.
The
Speaker.
gentlelady reserved. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman reserved. The gentlelady from D.C. is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to respond to the comments from my friend from Maryland. The National Park Service has a maintenance backlog of $23 billion, including $2 billion in the District of Columbia alone. The National Park Service does not have the money to transform the RFK Stadium site from acres of asphalt into parks or mixed uses. There is precedent for Congress giving title to or administration jurisdiction over federal land to states and other jurisdictions for no consideration. We do not have to look far for examples. Let's look at two of the many examples in D.C. First, Section 8124 of Title 40 of the U.S. Code has long permitted the federal government to transfer administrative jurisdiction over federal land in D.C. to the D.C. government for no consideration. Second, in 1986, Congress directed the Department of Interior to enter into a 50-year lease with D.C. for the RFK Stadium site for no consideration. While it is true that H.R. 4984 does not require D.C. to pay the federal government for administrative jurisdiction over the RFK Stadium site, it is expected D.C. will spend hundreds of millions of dollars transforming the site from acres of asphalt into mixed-use development. This bill would not require a stadium to be built at the site. Whether to build a stadium would be a decision for the elected D.C. government. Several members of the D.C. Council have expressed opposition to a new football stadium at the site. I reserve.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The D.C. Robert F. Kennedy Memorial Stadium Campus Revitalization Act will allow D.C. to develop the vacant RFK Stadium site. I encourage all my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill that will promote economic growth and revitalization to Southeast D.C., and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from D.C. is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to close and urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this bill.
The gentlelady yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 4984 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed. And without objection, the motion.
I ask for the yeas and nays.
Sorry?
I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3511, the Service Disabled Veteran Opportunities in Small Business Act.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 163, H.R. 3511. A bill to amend the Small Business Act to require training on increasing contract awards to small business concerns owned and controlled by service-disabled veterans and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Williams, and the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Velasquez, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and exclude extraneous material on the bill.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased that this is the first of 8 bills from the Committee on Small Business that we'll be considering today. That goes to show that the Committee on Small Business is a committee that gets things done. And I hope our Senate counterparts follow our lead to get these bills to the President's desk. I rise today in support of H.R. 3511, the Service Disabled Veterans Opportunities in Small Business Act, which is sponsored by my good friend, Representative Lota, from the great state of New York. H.R. 3511 builds on this Congress's dedication to America's veterans. Our country asks a lot from our brave servicemen and women, and therefore we must support them when they return to civilian life and ensure that they have a fair shot to succeed back home. That's why this bill is critical to ensuring that our veterans are supported as entrepreneurs. The federal government is the largest consumer in the world, and each year these agencies have a goal to spend a portion of the contracts with small businesses owned by service-disabled veterans. In last year's NDAA, Congress raised the spending goal to 5% of all contracting dollars. Unfortunately, not every federal agency has met its commitment to the men and women who bravely served our country. H.R. 3511 would remedy this by requiring the Small Business Administration to keep failing agencies and help them improve their inclusion of service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. Our veterans deserve to have every chance to succeed in the federal contracting space. I'm proud to support H.R. 3511. I urge all of my colleagues to vote on this bill. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, today we are considering 8 bills, 6 sponsored by Republicans and 2 by Democrats. I look forward to working with the chairman to bring the additional 5 Democratic bills to the floor that were unanimously approved by the committee in a timely manner. I would like to thank my colleagues, Representatives LaLora and Mr. McGarvey, for their work to bring this bill to the floor today. In FY 2022, federal agencies awarded 4.57% of contract dollars and a record of just over $28 billion to service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. But this number does not tell the whole story. Every year, a handful of agencies do not meet their individual agency goals, showing that there is more that can be done. This legislation will require SBA to issue guidance